Hello, welcome to EHK News. Today we're very happy to have Simon Squibb as our guest today. Simon has been an angel investor in Hong Kong for over 18 years and he's now currently the CEO of Nest. So Simon, thank you very much to be our guest today. What is your comment on Hong Kong's early stage investment scene? Are there a lot of angel investors in Hong Kong like yourself?
Well, I've been in Hong Kong 18 years. Actually, I started out life really more on the entrepreneurial side of the equation, where I started businesses from scratch and built them. So I'm not your typical angel. A lot of the angels in Hong Kong come from the finance sector, Goldman Sachs or those sorts of organizations. I actually come from the entrepreneurial side of the equation. So I've built businesses from scratch and know how hard that is. I've raised money myself, so I know how hard that is. And so my focus now for the last 4 years has been on the actual investment side full time. So what I was doing for the last 18 years was not only investing in my own businesses, investing in building them up from scratch, I was doing angel investing on the side when I saw talented people. And it's only been in the last 4 years that I've really been focused full time on my angel investments and investing in those entrepreneurs and helping them. In Hong Kong, there are a huge amount of angels, huge amount of people that have the money to invest in young companies. I think in the last 18 months in particular, you've seen a push where a lot of people now are looking at startups as an opportunity. I think Hong Kong has been quite spoiled for the last 10 years or so, where property has done so well, the stock market has been buoyant and trustworthy. And now you see, for example, interest rates are almost at zeros, or are at zeros. People get nothing in the bank. Property is less secure, a little bit more erratic with government regulations, and people don't really like the stock market as much. So startup investing has become quite hip and cool, and there's huge opportunities for investors. So money always follows opportunity, and so lately in Hong Kong, there's a lot more angels popping up. My organisation, Nest, we're focused on being more than just angels. We think that people, entrepreneurs, they need money and help. So we're focused on doing both, supplying capital, so putting cash into companies, but we think even more important is the support that we give. So internally we have people that help with strategy, we have people that help with communications, go to market, all of the things that I think a young entrepreneur in particular perhaps doesn't know. So we would say, a lot of people don't know what they don't know. I know myself, when I started my own first company at 15 years old, I think I knew it all. I thought I knew it all, but I didn't, of course. So I've discovered through being an entrepreneur myself, there's a lot of things that you don't know what to ask to get the answers to. So Nest, what we try to do is be a group of angels, so putting capital in, but at the same time being a group of people that are full-time focused on helping the entrepreneur.
So Simon, I'd like to know, what about the mid to later stage investment in Hong Kong? So where can Hong Kong startups find them?
Well, there are a lot of different organizations that invest in startups, different types of startups at different stages. Frankly, Hong Kong has it all. The good thing about Hong Kong is it has a transparent banking system, good rule of law, low tax. So as an investor putting money into companies, frankly, I've invested in companies in the US. It's tough and also, frankly, very high tax. In addition, I've invested in companies in China. You put your money in, getting your money out is a completely different story. It's tough, very tough, and it's very complicated. So I like Hong Kong as a place to be based and invest in, because it is easy to put your money in as an investor and easy to get your money out. Now, that doesn't mean to say, market size, market opportunity, places like China, for example, mainland China, I'd like to say, people do see perhaps an opportunity to base themselves there and look at China-based investment opportunities, and a lot of the big guys have done that. But what you'll find when you look at the details, a lot of those guys actually live in Hong Kong. And they might be looking at startups in China, but what they're really looking for are startups that can think big, startups that can be global, startups that can get a large number of users. And frankly, now with the cloud and technology getting cheaper to build, there's absolutely no reason why Hong Kong can't produce exactly the same sorts of companies. So it's just a mindset issue that personally for the last 4 years I've been working on with entrepreneurs based in Hong Kong. Don't think about building a business that just taps into the local domestic market. I mean, Hong Kong itself has just over 7 million people. Silicon Valley has just over 7 million people. So when businesses open up in Silicon Valley, they don't just think about Silicon Valley, they think, of course, normally about the whole of the US. I think what Hong Kong has an opportunity to do is think about the world from day one. because the domestic market is not big enough. So they have to think about the world. And all we have to do is change the mindset of perhaps some of the international investors. So they don't think that startups that start in Hong Kong are only thinking about Hong Kong, because that's not true. A lot of the startups that start here may use Hong Kong as a test market. I mean, this market has 50 million visitors in the last 12 months. That's an awesome demographic to test something on. And if anyone still thinks that Hong Kong is not China, then you only have to live here and walk the streets to see it just as much China as Beijing or Shanghai. Frankly, because you launch a startup in Beijing doesn't mean you're going to get the whole of China. So you still have to think big and think scale in Beijing. And just because you're in Beijing doesn't mean it's going to work. So I think Hong Kong has that advantage that it can think both east and west. So it can think about going into China and scaling into China. It can also, though, think about going into Europe or going into America. And so this is something I've personally been spending quite a lot of time with the Sequoias and the Dole Capitals and the big institutional investment firms to say, hey, you know, maybe Hong Kong a little bit has been overlooked, but if you start looking at the detail of some of the entrepreneurs here, they're international from day one. The teams are international from day one. I mean, again, Beijing, often the teams are nothing but China teams. In America, the teams are often nothing but American teams. But the teams that are in Hong Kong are often global teams from day one. So it will take time, and it's emerging now. You're starting to see a lot of startups get investment from people like Sequoia, and you're starting to see the Series A, Series B money flow into Hong Kong. But of course, the startups that start here have to think global from day one to attract that sort of investment. But like I always say, money will follow opportunity. So the key to entrepreneurs in Hong Kong succeeding is they have to think global from day one, and they have to build those companies into opportunities that make those companies want to invest in them. And it's just a mindset thing. If you think that way, you will get investment. You don't need to move to Beijing, you don't need to move to Silicon Valley, you don't need to move to Israel. You just probably need to shift your brain and think globally. Those people will seek you out if you have a big enough business.
What about strategic investors?
Strategic investors is a big part of what makes Hong Kong work. So making sure that the people that invest in your business can help you as well as put capital in is at the core of what we do at Nest. So that network in Hong Kong is quite strong. We've got a lot of people, for example, if you've got a fintech idea that are in banking that can perhaps invest and support you in that fintech idea, as an example, a category. There's a lot of people in manufacturing based here that if you, for example, have a wearable tech concept can help you. So Hong Kong has an awful amount, a large amount of strategic investors. In fact, that's often the most popular way from an angel's perspective to invest. So when I'm advising entrepreneurs about how to seek investment, often it is about picking the right investor to solve the problems that you have. So if your problem is raising more capital, probably good to get involved with people that have done that before. If your problem is manufacturing your product, for example, your wearable tech product, then go to people that are manufacturing product to be strategic investors in your business. So that's personally something that I push quite a lot when, say, for example, growth capital stage of investment is needed. It's fine to just get money in, but the best way to grow your business is money and help, as I've said many times. And strategic investors are a very, very important part of making the business work. And having built businesses from scratch myself, I know it's been the strategic partners and investors that have helped me scale those businesses. They often have the skills that I don't have, or the connections that I need that I don't have, or the know-how and knowledge that I don't have, and that allows my businesses to scale.
Look, I've seen angel investors pass on the deal once they hear the word exit strategy, because they think that the founder is not really committed to bring their vision to life. So what's your take on that?
Well, exit strategies generally are an important element of perhaps what an angel or any investor looks for when investing in a business. If you're, as an entrepreneur, focused too heavily on the exit of the business that you're running, you're often not doing the business for the right reasons. So I think it's very important as a founder to perhaps be doing something you love and to be doing something you believe in and not really looking for an exit. It is something that a lot of people like to talk about. You know, I see it in the market, people like to talk about the exits, but there is something to be said about just building a business that you love as an entrepreneur. And so as an investor, I'm looking for an eventual exit. We put our money in, and eventually we need to get our money out so we can put our money back in again. So we need an exit. But it is important that the company itself is not necessarily focusing on that. It doesn't mean to say that it's a bit like monetization. You know, not to say you shouldn't have some sort of idea of what could happen, but it's certainly not something you should be racing towards. I think you should be racing towards creating a good user experience, or making customers happy, or maybe even eventually making money. I mean, it's an interesting problem all on its own, making money or not in the startup world, but I think ultimately the entrepreneur should run a business that they love, and they want to change the world or make something happen in the universe that's not, solve a problem that needs solving, and it should not be about the exit. So as an investor, although we need to think about it as investors, we do warn the entrepreneurs not to focus too heavily on it. And if someone's focused on nothing but exit, we're building this company to sell it in 2 years' time, then often that's a big red flag for investors, because what happens in 2 years' time if you don't sell it? And that often is the case. People won't come along and just buy your company like you think they will. Then you're stuck with a business you don't love, and therefore the business probably will collapse, or you'll give up. So it's very important to not focus on the exit as the entrepreneur. But investors, we need to have some sort of structure around that, sure.
So I know Asia focuses on monetization far sooner in company building process. Like for the Silicon Valley, they will wait for 2 to 3 years before determining the revenue model. So for you, do you take more like an Asian approach or the Valley approach, and why do you do that?
When it comes to investing, in the end, we all want companies that turn into Facebook or Twitter. As an investor, and probably as an entrepreneur, we want those sort of valuations, and we want those sort of potential, prowess and power and success. But frankly, even in markets like Silicon Valley, not everyone is a hit it out the park success. We call those types of businesses golden unicorns, right there. And I think it's important as an investor, and probably important as an entrepreneur, to look at different ideas in different formats. And I think it's a little bit wrong to perhaps, for example, say, well, we never need to have any monetization strategy around this business. We'll just get users, which frankly is a misunderstanding, I think, for a lot of people, including myself. I mean, having built businesses myself from scratch, I mean, the truth is you've got to try and have at least some sort of structure around where the business is going. So, for example, a lot of people don't realize, but YouTube, when it first started, did have a monetization structure. It said, eventually, the founder of that business said that it would be subscription-based, and people would subscribe and pay to subscribe to certain channels. Now, of course, the business grew and blew up, and then Google bought the business, and then Google could put AdWords around it, and they didn't need to worry about monetization. But when they were raising their money, and when they were talking about what they wanted to do, people don't realize they did have a monetization plan in there. So I think that's an example story that I do try to talk through with entrepreneurs. Is, as an investor, it's not like we want to see money coming in the door and we're not going to invest unless it's a profit-making business. Of course not. At the early stage investing is all about investing in potential, investing in the entrepreneur. That's what we do. We invest in the person. But it is smart to at least have a prediction as to where revenue could come in the future. Whether or not it ends up being that way and Google buy the business before we even have a chance to monetize, then great from an investor's perspective. But I think for the entrepreneur, you should try to have some sort of long-term structure about where money can come from. That doesn't mean to say that you turn on the monetization too early, can be dangerous, or frankly, you turn it on too late, can be dangerous. If you look at Facebook, perhaps as soon as it's turned on the monetization, it started losing users. And suddenly it allows people like Pinterest and Instagram to come into the market and steal market share because people don't want ads. So at what point do you turn on monetization? What point do you talk about monetization? Twitter, for example, still today, is losing money. How do they monetize? Do they want to upset their user base? They've got user base have got used to a certain way of operating, so they start throwing ads in there just to upset people, right? So I think it's a tricky thing, but I always suggest to entrepreneurs you increase your chances of raising money, you increase your chances of being a successful business if you at least have in the back of your mind some way later to monetize.
Okay, so Simon, do you invest in Silicon Valley clones?
Well, actually, I do not invest in Silicon Valley clones. I actually really dislike the model of copying other people. In my opinion, it kind of goes against the whole concept of startups, where you're trying to change the world and do something different and use your imagination to be unique in the universe. So I see a lot of businesses like, for example, Rocket Internet, who are funding companies that are literally copying something they've seen in the US. So you'll see a lot of open table clones, for example. I think a lot of those businesses, just in my opinion, and this opinion does upset people, but I don't like copying other people. I think you should be original. I think you should create a unique company from scratch. I don't think you should look at open table, for example, and say, you know what, I'm going to copy that exactly and run fast and do it here. Because it kind of links back to this whole build something you love model. If you build something someone else loves, or you build something someone else did, then really often you're just doing it for the money. And when, for example, you build open table in China and no one buys it, or you build open table in China and you didn't build it from scratch as a passion project, then often these things don't work. Often you end up holding these companies and just hoping that open table in the US will buy you, for example, and it ends up backfiring more often than being successful. However, there is a very delicate line here between copying and innovating, so kind of an evolution of an idea. So for example, if you look at MySpace, was Facebook copying MySpace? Some would say in a way, but really they were an evolution of an existing idea. This, I think, is a good idea. If you see something in the market that you think you can do better, you can improve the user experience, for example, you can make it better for customers, you can give a better value. I think this is absolutely a good idea to do for startups. In fact, I think startups often build on that. So look at Uber. It's looking at the taxi business and improving how it's done. So are they copying the taxi business? No, they've done it in a new way, in a fresh way, in a modern way. But they're not copying this. And I think that's and again, having gone to Silicon Valley with startups from Asia, first thing often people say to me is, wow, original idea from China. Almost as if it's China's always copying everyone else. Well, actually, of course, that's not true. Alibaba could be considered the evolution of Yahoo, right? Could be. So I think that's the way to go. I think an evolution of ideas as opposed to copying someone else's idea. I do think different markets are different. US, Europe, China, they do have different ways of operating and existing, so you can't exactly clone an idea and make it exactly the same in another market and necessarily make it work. However, there are organisations making money that way. There are people raising money on just copying other people's ideas. There's a model out there that works. Is it ethical? Is one question I have. I don't think it is.
So you despise those who copy it 100%?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a cop-out. Just copying someone else's idea, it's in my opinion, a little bit of a cop-out. So, I mean, even myself, Nest, in my opinion, is somewhat similar to Y Combinator. But we've adapted it. We didn't copy them. We started 4 years ago, so we started this when it was called to invest in startups in Asia. And we didn't copy Y Combinator. They weren't as famous as they are now. We didn't copy them. I like their model though. I like their ethos of helping entrepreneurs. I like the way that they give support, not just capital. And I like the way they help them raise money afterwards. So we've taken some of the essence that was good from what that company does.
Innovate the idea.
And then we innovate. So for example, we don't do it in batches here in Asia. We do it monthly. We don't expect people to suddenly quit their job like they do in the US and start a startup. We know that people in Asia do it gradually and over time, and they ease out maybe into a startup after they spend 4 or 5 months doing it part-time as well as a job, for example. So we've adapted our model to be more Asian focused and tried to improve it. We've tried to add on things, corporate partnerships, for example, that they're not doing in America. So we try to bring in the corporate environment, which again, in say the US versions of what we're doing, they're not doing that. So we try to power up these businesses in a different way. So my bottom line on this is I warn entrepreneurs, it's an easy trap to fall into. You see someone successful in another market like America and you're like, let's just do it here. But actually the best thing to do is make sure that you either evolve it, improve it, change it to suit your own personality, your own desires, your own dreams and ambitions, and make sure that whatever business you build has a core mission and vision that resonates with you. It doesn't resonate with the guy in the US that started it, it's got to resonate with you. Because you'll be running it here in Asia, you'll be driving it, so make sure it's a passion project, make sure it's something that really means something to you, and often that does not mean copy.
So I know a lot of people out there are trying to compare Hong Kong's startup ecosystem to Singapore's. So if you could take a time travel back to day one, would you start Nest in Hong Kong or in Singapore?
Well, actually, when I first decided 4 years ago I was going to be a full-time investor in startups, I spent some time traveling to all the different options that I've got. So I went to Silicon Valley and spent some time there and looked at that market and thought, wow, I know Asia, maybe I can be an influence in Silicon Valley with my Asian understanding. And then I went to London where my family live, and again there's a budding startup scene there. I thought, wow, maybe I could do it here in London and be near my family that live there, and there's an ecosystem buzzing in London. And then I went to Singapore, and you hear all the government funding and all these different schemes that the government is pushing to try and make the startup scene happen in Singapore. And then I came back to Hong Kong and I looked at this market and I thought to myself, it's interesting. Warren Buffett always says, when everyone's running away from something, run towards it. And the market that is overlooked is Hong Kong. And the reason I decided, in all these options that I had to do this investment firm in Hong Kong, over all these other options, I decided to do it in Hong Kong, was mainly because in Hong Kong, at the end of the day, it's a very straightforward structure. As I've said before, you can put your money into Hong Kong, get the money out of Hong Kong. It's a good rule of law. People want to live here. It's a wonderful test market for multiple cultures and multiple languages. And in the end, when you look at it, my personal opinion about Singapore is they have asked us many times to set up in Singapore. But when you look at the system, I have never known it to be a good idea for governments to own shares in startups. It just, in my opinion, will not work. When you look at it initially as an investor, you put your money in and it gets matched. That sounds awesome. But the truth is, it means that inflated valuations, bad ideas stay alive longer than they should. And in the end, you look at Silicon Valley where this works best, there's no government intervention, there's no government involvement. If there's a good business, private enterprise will fund it. In Hong Kong, money is not the problem. People have plenty of money. It needs more good ideas, and that's happening now. Entrepreneurs are taking the jump, they're not working at banks, they're not going to be lawyers, they start their own business, so that creates more opportunity for investors. But actually, Singapore, in my opinion, will end up probably having a problem. That doesn't mean to say there aren't some good startups in Singapore, there are. But the truth is that the Hong Kong government has a very similar approach to the Silicon Valley government. And that is create infrastructure to help, but don't meddle. So I'm actually advising the Hong Kong government not to put money into startups. They're not elected officials, and they take taxpayers' money and put it into companies they don't understand. When they lose that money, you just upset taxpayers. And I feel sorry for places like the Cyberport. This is their problem, because it's not natural for governments to invest in startups. What is natural is for entrepreneurs that have made money in building companies from scratch to then take that money and invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs. That's what I'm doing. That's how it works in Silicon Valley. The PayPal mafia, for example, they make money from PayPal and then they go and invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs with the money that they've made, or the next generation of ideas. That's how it works best. As an entrepreneur, I know how to help other entrepreneurs. As an entrepreneur, I'm willing to put my money in and lose it. If I'm putting in taxpayers' money, the Hong Kong population's hard-earned money, into a company and I have no downside, then it doesn't work. And that is a very interesting strategy from Singapore, but I know as an entrepreneur that it is doomed long term. And so I warn Hong Kong government not to follow Singapore into this hole. Instead, build infrastructure to help the ecosystem here. So for example, allow visas for CTOs. I'm trying to hire a CTO right now for one of the startups. Make it easy. Make sure the immigration department, they understand the difference between an SME and a startup. Create more platforms, more events, so that the talented entrepreneurs that live here and the talented entrepreneurs that want to move here have a way of showing off their idea and promoting it to the world of investment. So create platforms and structure and support mechanisms. Do not do the easy route, frankly, is what I think Singapore's done. Take money that you've got sitting in the bank in your sovereign wealth fund and throw it into companies and suddenly say that you're helping startups. It's not money that Hong Kong has a problem finding. It's the infrastructure the government should focus on. And that's why personally when I looked at Singapore, and we probably get an email a month from Singapore asking us to set up there, I will stay in Hong Kong because I think it's a false economy. However, there are some good companies in Singapore and I will still more than happy to invest in those good companies, but they're a little bit living in a bubble with the Singapore government funding them, and I'm worried about that for Singapore, and I'm worried about that for the startups that get the funding from the government. They often say, I've got money to survive 2 years. Well, if you're in startup world, you want to fail fast. You know, you want to know in 3 months whether this is an idea you should spend the rest of your life on or not. You don't want to spend 2 years to find that out. And if you get government grants, you can survive for 2 years. But that's not what this is about. This is about doing something, seeing it changes lives, and failing fast.
Simon, as an entrepreneur, how do you define success and failure?
Actually, this question of what is success and what isn't success is an interesting point. So often, for me anyway, when I'm looking at success, you might say, how much money did you make? But actually, I think it's about what impact you had on the world and what you learned. So I personally learned as much from my failures as I have from my successes. And so my successes, maybe monetary-wise, aren't necessarily the successes that I would like to see I impacting the world and making a difference and changing things. So, interestingly enough, you know, I haven't done lots of different businesses. I've really enjoyed businesses where we succeeded through a crazy idea that no one else thought would work. So, for example, years and years ago, we did a concept called coaster ads, where we took a normal coaster in a bar that normally is used by Carlsberg and Heineken, and we decided to turn it into an ad platform. And this platform was called Coaster Ads. And everyone said, oh, no one will advertise on those, no one wants to put, you know, their brand with a drink on top. And our first big advertiser who paid us millions of dollars was United Airlines. And they took the whole platform, you know, and advertised on it, and it was a big, big success. So I like that. I like stories where people, you know, naysayers, just like now, people say Hong Kong can't be a startup hub. It's not possible. There's no entrepreneurs here. And I always remind people, you know, Hong Kong actually has no natural resources, and this city was actually built on entrepreneurs. It may have lost its way with the success in property and finance. People got sucked into those things instead of starting their own business. But the people here have it in them naturally. So for me, I see success not just from a financial perspective. Probably if I was just looking at things from a financial perspective, we've had some pretty big wins. I mean, I think my creative agency, Fluid, is financially a very successful company. Again, if I look back when I started that agency 15 years ago, I never expected it to be 15 years later, Creative Agency of the Year and a very successful product and brand. I'm very proud of that business. I'm proud of the way it treats its staff. I'm proud of the way it tries to pioneer creative is not commodity. And I'm actually proud that it makes money, but I'm more proud of its ethics. I'm more proud, it's a success in my mind because it's pioneered the concept that you can create a creative agency in Hong Kong from scratch that has values, that doesn't rush things, that's not the cheapest in town, it has integrity in its production cycle, the people inside the company care, and that to me is a success. However, also, I look at a brand like Fluid that I built up over the years as a failure in a way, which I find hard to talk about. When I look at it, it's a service company. And service companies are very hard to scale. So that means that, okay, I spent maybe 10 years of my life building up that business and it is now successful, it makes money, so, you know, on paper it's a success. But I'm frustrated as well that if I wanted to scale that business into other markets, it's actually very hard to do that. It's got a reputation in Hong Kong, it's successful in Hong Kong. If I pick that brand up and I take it to London, it will take another 10 years for it to build the same reputation in that market. So in that respect, the ability for that business to scale is not there easily, therefore perhaps it's considered a failure by those that look for businesses like I do now that scale. So it's an interesting one, you know, what's success and what's failure. And in the end, for me, success will always come from, you know, what's the purpose of life? And the life with purpose is the answer, in my opinion. So I feel most satisfied, I say that things are a success if we tried something that had a purpose. And okay, maybe we make money, maybe we don't, maybe it scales, maybe we don't, but it has those core values and that purpose. And to me, failure is not trying at all, often. Or frankly, looking at something negatively, for example, just planning out how much money you're going to make. So to me, that's a failure. Well, giving one piece of advice to entrepreneurs is quite hard because I have quite a few, after so long of being self-employed and building businesses from scratch, I have quite a lot of insight and knowledge I can share with entrepreneurs. But the one thing maybe I can say from coming at it from an investor's perspective to entrepreneurs is that a lot of people pitch their businesses to investors. They want investors to invest in them. And that's great, and that's how I make a living, so I need it. But I would just say to people that make sure when you're pitching your business or you're doing your business, you're not pitching it to people like me to get investment. You should be pitching something you believe in. And maybe sometimes, for some people, a business that's going to scale or a business that's going to make a lot of money so it makes it worthwhile for investors might not be what people want. So make sure whatever you do it for yourself. You do it for humanity. Can I be so bold as to say? Live a life with purpose. Don't just build a business that you can sell. Don't just build a business based on what you think people will invest in. Spend time building something that means something to you, that gives your life purpose. And maybe you don't need investors like me. Maybe you just need to get your head down and do something you care about. So focus on that first, above all else. And then, okay, if you have a brilliant idea and you need to raise money, then great. But don't pitch the business to make me happy or your mum happy or anyone other than yourself. So that's the biggest piece of advice I give people. Really live a life with purpose.
I see. I'm sure all our audience, including myself, is learning a great lesson today. So thank you very much for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.